Thank you. So, hello everyone for yet another BWS Wise webinar. We're doing this webinar topic on EPR in informal economies, and we have Africa's focus this time. I'm Akanksha Singh. As most of you all know, I'm the community builder at BWS Wise. And a brief intro about our organization. We are a non-profit organization, and we've been bridging the global waste solutions expertise gap for more than 10 years now. And if you see the value in making such discussions free of cost to anyone and everyone, available or free of charge to anyone, no paywalls, no cost. Our community members have told us that they use our webinars to train their staff, incorporate data from our webinars into published reports, influence policy, and network with experts around the world. We seek your support in that. We have started a campaign on fundraising. 500 people only, we are asking just for $20 each to support us in our operations for over next year. And with just $20, you can ensure our content stays free and open forever. We'll share the the link for this page over the chat as well. Uh, Next, moving to the topic today, as countries in the African sub-region advance for EPR frameworks, a critical challenge is also there. And the major challenge is how to design systems that effectively integrate informal sectors while addressing market distortions, particularly around pricing, access to materials, and uneven competition across the value chain. Now, this webinar with the eminent panel here with us will explore the practical strategies to address the informal sector, dominance, and market pricing distortions with the aim of developing more effective and inclusive EPR systems that reflect Africa's socio-economic realities as well. Moderating this session, we have today Alyu. Alyu Sadiq is an environmentalist renowned for his contribution to tackling waste, climate change, and pollution challenges throughout innovative solutions, policy, and advocacy and research. Joining us with him is Madam Ibukun, a sustainability specialist with special emphasis on environmental management, circular economy, and climate impact. She has over 20 years of work experience across the social and private sectors, where she's helped diverse organizations to enhance their competitive advantage through improved environmental process. We also have Reinhard Smith. He's managing the operations of Closing the Loop. Closing the Loop is the world's leading provider of sustainable IT procurement services. Now, we've also shared the LinkedIn profiles of our panelists to all the audiences in the chat section as well. Feel free to connect with them and network them on them individually. Before we proceed further, we have some announcements to be made, and this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our website and on our YouTube channel. Please use the Q&A function for your questions to the panel, and use the chat function separately for all your views, opinions, and some reports and insights related to the topic and for networking purposes as well. Use these separate functions for separate things. We do not want to lose out on any questions in the chat section, so please use the Q&A judicially. Back to the panel. Over to you, Alyu.
Thank you, Akanksha. And it's a pleasure to also be on this session. So just to proceed, again, this is going to be interesting because we have experts who don't just bring theoretical, but also practical experience. I would like to say a few things, but before we begin, I think let's do a quick icebreaker, just to get, the atmosphere in the room. We have a few questions, and I'll be happy if you can just click on it. It's just going to take us 2 minutes. Please, Akanksha, go on. So the first question is just to get your opinion. Who dominates the recovery of recyclable waste in your own country? I'll be happy to get your opinion on this. Is it the informal sector? Is it the formal recyclers? Who has the chunk of the recovered waste that comes from, that has value? And then could it be maybe some 50-50 balance? Okay. The polls is showing informal, and then slightly below that formal. We're just gonna have a few seconds before we move to the next question, just to see if anyone hasn't responded yet. Okay, so informal sector is perceived to dominate the recovery with about 45%, and formal actors or formal recyclers about 40%. Thank you very much. So next question. Yeah, we can go to the next question, Akansha. I think it's still the first question. Okay, yeah. So also, please, what's your opinion about the effectiveness of EPR in preventing pollution in your own country? There are lots of debates about if it's working, if it's not working, if it's effective, if it's not effective. What is your own experience or at least your opinion? Um, okay. I think there's a huge opinion going to it being partially effective in people's countries. Okay. Um, so you have now a challenge between partially effective and not effective. Mostly partially effective, 52% partially effective. Okay, so in terms of very effective, it's just 11%. So it means there's a consensus opinion that EPR has challenges. And so that's the point of the webinar today. Okay, thank you so much for your feedbacks. Now we're going back to the conversation. Yeah, we can end the polls at this moment. Thank you. So basically partially effective from the popular opinion. Thanks, Akanksha. We can end the polls now. Okay. Yep. For the sake of those who might just not be familiar with what EPR is, basically you can see globally there's increased surge of waste generation, again, because of consumerism, because of like a lot of things, and also our population. So the EPR, which is Extended Producer Responsibility, is an environmental policy that holds manufacturers or producers accountable for the product they produce across the life cycle of the product, essentially ensuring that they make sure that their product do not become pollution or waste without being properly managed. And this was generated, this emerged from Europe, specifically Sweden, but over time it has gone international and many countries now have the EPR in different products, from plastics to electronics, amongst others. Specifically in Africa, the informal sector are integral to waste management. And you can see from the polls, they have a lot of resource control in terms of recovered waste and all of that. The conversation today is about the EPR, the informal sector, the African dynamics, the challenges about EPR, and how can we have a more functional EPR. And with me, like Akankasha mentioned, we have like experts who are working on the field and on the ground. And I would start with Mrs. Ibukun Faluyi, who is the executive director of EPRON, which is the PRO leading EPR implementation for electronics in Nigeria. It's good to have you on the call again, Madam Ibukun. We've done a lot of uh, work and research, and you continue to be very, very helpful. So, based on your experience, now I would want to understand the challenges you faced generally around the implementation of EPR in Nigeria for electronics, but also the angle of the informal sector. How has it been in terms of this, trying to have this integration? What are those challenges? And also there have been gaps around the producers are not paying, and so like those who are meant to collect waste as formal collectors are not incentivized because of these funding gaps, but the informal sector have more access because they have more money, more resource control. Again, all of these things, we want to unpack them also from your own experience. And the next question, which is just, I'm trying to give it at once, but we're going to come back to it. What can be the way forward to have this integrated approach based on the context and realities of Africa? Again, EPR was domesticated, from a European concept, but it's now in Africa. And how can we integrate these realities? Over to you, Ma.
Thank you very much, Aliyu. I appreciate your questions and appreciate the opportunity to be on this platform. Thank you, Be Wise as well, for making it happen. So without saying so much, I've put together a few slides that will help to synthesize these important questions that you've asked, because it's a question on the lips of so many people that have seen EPR work effectively in Europe, and they think, oh, why not? This is something that is going to be very useful for us in Africa, and it can be indeed very practical and useful. So without taking so much of your time, I'm just going to share my screen, and then we can, begin to speak to it one after the other. So in speaking about members of the informal economy, you and I know that they are very, very critical to material recovery as far as Africa is concerned. And, having those kind of members integrated into the EPR arrangement seems just like a no-brainer. It's something that is extremely important. Is it something that we've done before? What's the value of having these people integrated into the EPR arrangement? And, so many important questions is what I'm going to speak to in this slides. The overview is just why do we need them on the EPR? What are the challenges we faced in trying to do so? What are the disparities in pricing? How does it come about? And then do we even think that there's a solution in sight for what we're saying? Or should we just say, okay, we're not having these people anymore in the EPR framework? So basically, having the informal people in the EPR framework is extremely important. For one, we've established over the years that they make up a very important and integral part of the e-waste recovery process. They are very useful in material recovery. They collect tons upon tons of e-waste. You see me saying tons upon tons of e-waste because it's difficult to say this is the quantity of e-waste that they've actually collected. It's a special case study to be able to get that because of the undocumented way that they work. And then that provides jobs for millions of people. There's a study that estimates that in Lagos State alone, we have over 100,000 members of the informal economy in the e-waste management sector alone. So I'm not talking about plastics, but e-waste on its own. There are over 100,000 informal people working in that space. So you can see how relevant they are in terms of material recovery, and then the job opportunity that provides for them. It keeps a lot of people engaged. It puts food on the table of so many people and their families at the end of every day. So you can see why it's important to have them as important members of the EPR framework. More importantly, aligning them, it's a requirement from the national regulations that governs electronic equipment and e-waste management in Nigeria. The existing regulation and then the guidance documents, the current regulation recognizes them and their role. So it says, okay, these people should be part of it, and then they should carry out certain activities as prescribed by that regulation. And that's why you see in the EPR model that is displayed on the screen, the informal collectors are an important part of the collection framework. So they collect e-waste from consumers, both individual consumers and corporate consumers. And the arrangement is that they should feed this to collection centers, formal collectors, and these collectors will in turn then take it over to the recyclers for environmentally sound management. And then it's recognized that they should be paid the fees, the EPL fees that are collected from producers by EPRON should, trickle down to them, generally as part of the wages for the labor that they put in place to make all of this happen. And one may wonder that did Nigeria even go ahead to do this? It's because it aligns with internationally recognized principles and requirements of International Labour Organization, specifically Recommendation number 204, 2015. In that ILO law is specified you must keep people's job, do not make people unemployed until you have another kind of job that you want to provide for them. So whatever they're doing, help them to keep doing it in the best way possible. So if you are going to transition people from informal to formal economy, that's the best approach to do. but there are so many other important fundamental labor standards that should be incorporated to make all of this happen. So definitely, we are very certain that this is the direction to go, making sure that they're an active part of the EPR. Now, has there been efforts to try to really integrate them as required? Yes. So there was a JEF-funded project that was piloted in Lagos State between 2019 and 2023. And that project did a lot of work in the informal space. So it gave a lot of recognition to them and developed the model by which the EPR will be implemented with them as being integral parts, just exactly as described in that model. So what was done is individual collectors, informal members of the economy were assigned to collection points. So about 8 to 10, each collection points were mandated to have 8 to 10 informal people that will work with them and they will be registered. And together with Loma in Lagos State, these people were registered into a cooperative on its own. They were assigned ID cards so that they could work freely, go from house to house to collect without being harassed by any agency or any law enforcement officers looking at them as people that are armed robbers or whatever. And then they were also provided with PPEs. More importantly, they were trained. Training was necessary to help them to understand the menace of improper handling of electronic waste. So they were trained on proper handling. They were sensitized on the dangers of improper handling. And then they were put together with these cooperatives. And then, that relationship was started in that space. And indeed, that program successfully went. And we can say at the end of the day, the program had registered about 30 collection points. And in these 30 collection points, they had about 300 informal members of the economy that were working with them. So when it was time for us to start cascading our project to other states, the same model was we tried to replicate in each of the states that we've tried to move to, working with this informal sector. But how has the experience been? For one, we know that members of the informal economy, as far as e-waste is concerned, have highly polluting practices. They want to recover the valuable materials from the electronic waste, so they will do it in whatever way they know. And some of their practices are extremely crude. You see them burn the cable so that they can extract the copper wire. And in burning the cables is a job for somebody, and then the copper wires belong to another person. One thing we've seen is those practices are what they are not willing to stop. They burn the cables, they do all kinds of things that are highly polluting practices. And despite the trainings, you see that they still perpetuate it because the thing is, a few studies that we've conducted have seen that they understand that these things aren't wrong, but they've put the economic benefits ahead of their health and the environment and would rather do that first because they feel that's the only way they can get themselves satisfied. And trying to say, okay, the collection arrangements that is prescribed according to regulations is collect and give to formal collectors. You do not have to open. You'll be paid the same fee that it's what is there for. But these people are like, no, they prefer to, because they do not trust that they will get the full fee that they expect. They feel they will earn more if they go about with their polluting practices themselves. So they perpetuate their activity and they refuse to work within that confines of the responsibility assigned to them, which is just to collect. They will collect, they will dismantle, and they will pollute actively. Now, another thing about them is they are highly organized and work within a certain defined network. So you're working with an informal person, we've assigned to different formal collectors. They will definitely not bring to those collectors because they've been brought to the cities a lot of times by somebody who brings them solely for the purpose of getting valuable materials for him. And in doing that, they owe their allegiance to this person because it's the person that's shown them the trade, organized them, and shown them how to go. So they will not feel obligated, whether it is regulatory or not, to report to somebody else. That arrangement is simply not working. So once you see them in a while, the next time you don't see them with the registered collectors anymore. And so it was a case of people that you've registered, but the actual activity or implementation wasn't really happening. And then they have very seasonal work patterns. 1 minute they are here, the next time is another set you see, because they work in a migratory manner. It depends on how the relationship goes with who they are working with. If it works well, they stay. Then also sometimes they want to go back and do some farming activities in the city, in the villages where they come from. So they can be quite unstable, and it can be very difficult to keep on working with them. And generally, informal people, they have challenges with being documented because they associate documentation with, exposure, and they feel that when they are exposed, then they need to pay more tax. So they cannot differentiate between trying to document them to understand what the material flows is, and document. They feel that any form of documentation is exposing them to government for taxation purposes, and so they will definitely run away from that. Now, so these are the challenges that we've seen in working with them. And especially in trying to work with these people and the formal sector, it's a huge challenge because typically the formal people bear the full cost. If you see this picture here, a formal recycler will not do this. A formal recycler will take a product, and once they take a product, they will take full responsibility for the product from start to finish. Whether it has hazardous components, whether it has valuable fractions, they have full responsibility for the product. So they will spend money where they need to spend money, and then they would also what's it called, generate money from products that can give them valuable income. But in the case of the informal people, they don't do that. This guy will burn this cable to be able to extract the copper wire he requires. If he's not able to burn, if he's able to extract it without burning the cable, then he dumps the cable, the flame retardant plastics in the bin. He couldn't be bothered about it. If he takes a refrigerator, he takes the steel that is there, he takes the copper and all the valuable metals, and then he puts the insulators in the bin. But that is not the way for a formal person. The formal person will have full responsibility. So the cost element between both people is not the same. The formal person has to pay more to manage the e-waste that they've collected, while the informal person, so they have this undue advantage over the formal people because they are able to extract more, pay more for these materials eventually to the consumers and even within themselves. So it's very difficult trying to integrate them because a formal person will take consideration of all that he has to pay and say, okay, you know what, with all this that I have to pay, I will have to manage, I'm going to pay less. They would not. So that price disparity is a major challenge in the country. But we feel that regardless, there are solutions because we've seen a lot of these solutions in other climes, and it seems to be working in some, and it's something we're looking at. Okay, maybe we could also adopt them. And also in working with them over the years, we've come to see that, okay, maybe this can also be approaches that we can take to improve the things forward. For one, the way the existing regulation is, it integrates informal people, but it limits the activity to collection. Now, informal people feel that if they are not dismantling, they are being cheated. So they feel that the dismantling gives them an advantage. And the challenge we have is in the approach of the dismantling. So what are the ways that we can do? We feel that the first thing is to look at revising the regulation in a way that allows them to do what they really want to do. So it gives them the liberty to actually manage this e-waste themselves, but doing it in an environmentally sound manner, and now with stricter guidance as to how this must be done. Then also is to ensure that in integrating the informal sector, we do not work directly with the informal guys, the scavengers that are moving on the street, but the network heads. Who are those guys that have brought them into the cities to work for him? Then we integrate the network head into the EPR. That way, the network head now brings his people on board because he sees that, okay, this is the direction that we're going, and then he himself is able to direct the people to come to work with him the way we imagine that they would work. So the network head is integrated, and naturally the people that are under him also get integrated. Then we use a cooperative model to facilitate centers where these materials can be handled in an environmentally sound manner. We have a challenge with the approach they're using. Let's provide the approach that is right so that they go to those centers, they bring the e-waste into the centers, and then they get a cable stripper to remove the copper wire instead of burning. They get here, someone does all the dismantling in the way that they want instead of burning. And in those centers, they get to pay for the services that they are provided with, or they get to be trained to use the facilities to do what they need to do. And then because they pay a fee for it, it provides a level playing field between what they are recycling and what the formal people are doing. That way, the formal person and them are able to operate at par, because the full cost of managing the products now comes into their realm, and then we can begin to see that we have that price parity between the formal and the informal. Then they need to be trained extensively on best practices on how to work, use equipment, and do all those things in an environmentally sound manner to dismantle appropriately, disaggregate products without necessarily polluting the environment. Help them to understand what are the most hazardous fractions that must be depolluted first before we go into further treatment. And then we used to utilize creative ways to get them to be trusting and then use those centers. Because if you provide the centers and they are not trusting and they still feel, oh, they are going to be documented, then they stay back, then the centers will be useless. So it's important to even first of all find out with a study to see, okay, how will this work? Are they willing to use such centers or not? What will make them want to use those centers as well? Then enforce punitive measures on polluting practices. It's very critical that the pollution, it's right in our face, we see it, but no one is doing anything about it. The regulatory agencies need to step in and do something very drastic so that people understand this thing for what it really is, and then they start gravitating towards it. More importantly, we need to create awareness, increase awareness level on the hazardous nature of e-waste and the polluting practice, so that once people become extremely aware of this, then they will not allow these things, it increases the not in my backyard syndrome, and then they do not allow these people to perpetrate these actions around them. So there is now restrictions on all these activities as well. And then more importantly, the government needs to implement and enforce the existing regulation on EPR implementation, because we need these EPR fees and levies to be paid to the PROs, and then the money can be used to facilitate all of this. These centers can only be built with financing. It must make economic sense. It must make, but the finance must also be there to make all these activities happen, and then create awareness. It comes also with funding, and then we can now get a system that is both practical and realistic solution, brings that level playing ground for everybody, and then gets the EPR going in the direction that we actually will want it to go. So thank you so much for listening. I
Great.
appreciate the attention you've given to this.
Fantastic. Thank you for giving us all of those ground realities of EPR. And that's why, for those joining from like other parts of the world, you can see like the different contexts of EPR and the challenges which comes from like the local realities. There are a lot of points I've mentioned. The next speaker is going to be going deeper, also kind of giving his own experiences around such realities, having worked in Africa. But some few points I have noted down, which I think is very important to just re-emphasize, is for the last 4 months, 5 months, I was also doing like a research under my thesis on EPR in Nigeria, and so like I got the opportunity to visit these informal sites and get to interact with them, and like everything that she has said is actually the reality. In terms of way forward, just to mention, like you can see that for example, this economic disadvantage that the informal have over the formal, again, because of this huge hierarchical loyalty system of the informal sector, it's really beyond, I feel like it was not perceived, all of this were not really perceived in the design in the beginning. So it was kind of maybe omitted. And, it was more of just like a walkover thing. But then when it was being implemented, these realities, were coming up and clearly showing their challenges. And one of my recommendations, which I mean, is also part of this is, again, can we have an inclusive enforcement? Because you mentioned like strict enforcement. But what I realized was like when I went to like a particular informal site, this one site in Lagos, some of them even work at night. Some of them do not even want government to know where they operate. So they are kind of very secretive. So can we have like a system whereby you have, again, one of the issues is like jobs by the informal sector will be lost. So there's this fear of they don't have what to eat because they do it for survival. So can we have like a system whereby the informal sector are kind of integrated as part of the implementation of enforcement? So more of like not just government to informal, but government with informal against informal who do not comply. Maybe such kind of systems because they know where they operate, they know where they are. Again, they kind of receive incentives for kind of being active. But all in all, and Piotr mentioned something in the comment section, which we're going to come back to this, about international EPR fees. There's a lot of second-hand items that are shipped, which the EPR fees currently are not exported to the countries where the items become waste. So can this also, and there's been like estimates about, EEB made an estimate of about 340 million, euros that is lost annually. Can such fees be tapped as part of an international coalition strategy to ensure that these communities get more funding to actually enforce EPR? Again, these are questions which I'm just throwing in the air and we're going to come back to it. But now we would go to Reinhard, who would spend the next 10, 15 minutes max to give us his own perspective about this issue. But specifically, I would just ask a kind of one question, but with so many elements for you to unpack. What are your thoughts regarding the EPR situation in the African context, at least based on what has been said? And what would be your suggestion to bridge this gap of resource control, of informal sector integration, and how to make EPR works better? Over to you, Reinhard.
Great, thank you. Excellent. My screen is shared as well, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. Right, so thank you very much for the opportunity to talk here. Thank you for the invitation, and actually also very much thank you for Ibukun to setting the scene for EPR. I think it's a good basis for what I would like to talk about. As mentioned, I'm René Smith, COO of Closing the Loop, and I would like to share specifically practical lessons that our company has had over the last 10 plus years dealing on the collection of electronic waste, eventual pathways to recycling, and everything on the African continent. Maybe a little bit of statistics of why maybe I have at least a little bit of legitimacy being here. Our organization has collected more than 8 million devices over the last period from various different African countries, ranging from Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, Uganda, and many more. And we've done more than 400 tons of e-waste collection and shipping and recycling. Important to say that we as an organization specifically look at not only the collection with the informal sector, which we exclusively work with, but also ensuring that everything we collect is recycled all the way through. So this includes the semi-valuable components, the hazardous components, the very negative value components, all of that. And we've also done a lot of shipping because unfortunately, not all capacity is available on the African continent yet. So we've done a lot of legal compliance shipping in order to ensure that we do things by the book, but also that we create business cases for more investment into infrastructure in Africa. So what we do, we have, and it's interesting to see Piotr's question and also the question that was mentioned just now about global EPR. Our company has developed a business model that is a little bit inspired by global EPR. I will not go too much into the business model itself, but it basically creates a fund that is available for collecting electronic waste. So we have a business model on one hand that funds the collection of electronic waste, it funds the logistics, and it funds the recycling eventually. And we collect from informal sector workers. So this means that businesses, banks, and consultancies and governments that have their obligation as well to recycle their waste safely. We don't deal with them. We specifically go to scrap yards or repair centers, or actually any workers in the informal sector that have access to electronic waste. We then ensure that these products are shipped in country safely, so going from various parts of the country to central hubs of our local partners in the countries that we work in. And then we store them, we evaluate them, we dismantle if that's necessary, also with local partners. And then we ship them to final recycling. If that has to be done, then we ship them to Europe for recycling, and the things that can be recycled locally, we do locally. We ensure that we use sound recycling processes in line with international regulations, European regulations very often, and we always try to achieve the most effective way of recycling while considering environmental and social value as well. And finally, we are working on developing local capacity. So the recyclers that we work with, we help them to develop as well. We do capacity building. When we collect products they have not recycled before, we ensure that they're trained in the proper recycling of these products, the proper dismantling, and the proper end pathways for fractions that that come from these products. We also help develop the collection networks that we work with. They keep growing, but we also make sure that the informal sectors we work with are that we have a proper relationship with them, so that they build on their bankability and their livelihoods and their long-term futures by working with us. And finally, we also participate in policy discussions, enforcement, and everything. So we really try to help ensure that policy is aligned with what is done on the ground. So we try to share in sessions such as these our practical experience, so that the policymakers are also well informed. And at the same time, we ensure that when there's policy, that we try and help turn that into practice by involving the people we work with into helping that they fit the policy and the regulations that have been created. So quickly, some of this was already mentioned by Ibukun, but so we work directly with informal workers, and what we've noticed is, first of all, they're very skilled at dismantling. This does not mean that they are dismantling in environmentally safe or say healthy manners or good for their own protection, but they are able to do so. In the end, unfortunately, a lot of speed and money wins, but we notice that there's a lot of skill in the informal sector. And they're also very skilled traders. You don't need to tell them what the value of certain products is, what the market rate is, what are products that are on the market, whether there's a way to sell them or not. They're very skilled at that. And they're extremely effective in collecting electronic waste and other waste as well. But of course, we're talking electronic waste today. So in some ways, I sometimes find them more effective at collecting and moving waste from various points to a central hub than we have in Europe, simply because it's a necessity and it happens quite well. So we see this as an opportunity to work with the informal workers. It's not just a necessity, it is an opportunity as well. And then the market itself. So on the one hand, you have the regulations, you have the policies, you have the long-term approach that we want to take. We would like EPR to be an effective mechanism. We want to be able to enforce EPR. But the market itself, I think it's good that people understand how that works. It's sometimes very hard. And of course, a lot of the participants in this panel, in this discussion, and also the attendees are from Africa. But it's very hard for people in Europe, for example, to understand that waste can be a commodity that is traded. Waste is almost, if you go and you want to buy electronic waste, it is similar to buying tomatoes or something else on the market. There's an actual price for certain products, and this scrap is traded at a certain price. So it's not a matter of just collecting waste. You actually have to buy the certain waste. And very often, these products, the value is based on the value of the materials inside. So for some of the electronics, that can be precious metals. Plastics can have certain prices. So and these prices fluctuate. Of course, if metal prices go up or down, then the prices of products go up and down. So it's very important to notice that. And one specific point of this is that it is based on the valuable materials. So a certain electronic product will have both valuable materials, let's take gold, for example, that is in circuit boards, but it will also have hazardous components such as mercury that is in monitors sometimes, or lead that is in monitors. In the informal sector, the negative prices are ignored and everything is based purely on the valuable prices. And this is because the hazardous and the non-valuable components are typically dumped. They are just discarded. Sometimes they are burnt. Take the example of the photo that Ibukun showed. The copper in the cable is valuable, the plastic is not, so they just burn off the plastic. And so this is a problem that exists in the market. And as Ibukun also mentioned, formal treatment can be, there is a way to get more money if an EPR is effective and if there's a working business model. But at the start, formal treatment is less lucrative because you have to pay for the negative value items, because you have to properly recycle the hazardous components. That costs money. So if you simply sell the valuable components, then you get more money. So this creates a sort of a gap that we've seen over the years of collecting. First of all, there's the economic disparity, the fact that proper recycling can be more expensive and therefore you get less money for your products. There is definitely, if you're trading with someone who does not take care of the environment or the socio-economic situation, then of course you're going to get less money for that. A second challenge is that the formal sector wants transparency. So in order to comply with regulation, in order to show that you're doing things the right way, you need to document what you're doing. You need administration. You need to put things into a database. EPR systems around the world have databases. And this is a challenge that the informal sector do not necessarily want to be transparent because they fear the consequences of that. There could be consequences such as being forced to pay taxes. Let's be real, not everyone in the informal sector is in some way paying taxes, but it also changes the situation that they currently have. So it's better to, better to deal with the devil, is an expression, right? So there is a fear of what would transparency bring to the business that we work on as an informal sector. And of course, there's a lot of environmental health and safety concerns in the informal sector. I think probably half the people on this webinar know how bad those can be, but the photo Ibukun showed is already enough to show how bad recycling can be. And this is not only for the workers, it's also long-term environmental concerns. And finally, it might sound like a simple thing, but the informal sector are used to a certain way of working. They've been doing this for a very long time. It's for them, it is effective, it provides income. So it takes quite a while to change this way of working. So it is as much change management as bringing in a new opportunity for the informal sector. So I'll approach a little bit the way forward that we see and that we've been doing over the last few years, but we also see growing this is probably the most effective way forward. So first of all, this relates to the last point on the previous slide is when someone is used to working a certain way, it takes a long time to change that. Immediately changing it from the way you're working now to the best way of working, following all the European practices, I find that impossible. So an iterative approach if needed, step by step, take along, work with the informal sector, work with them, integrate them, and step by step improve the situation. This can be, and I often say, integrate instead of formalizing them. So this can be simply establishing a very good relationship and doing things the way they already do them, but becoming a trusting partner. Trust was mentioned as well as an issue. So once you're a trusted partner, you can start demanding or working together with them to get better practices. So step by step, working together is a way forward. I think it's also good for both businesses and regulatory authorities to look at the opportunities that the informal sector gives. I mentioned earlier the effectiveness at collection, the effectiveness of collaboration and knowing the market and dismantling. This can be used as a benefit. So in my opinion, it doesn't mean everything has to be dismantled by formal, fancy recycling facilities with very expensive equipment. If you work with the informal sector, you can use their skills as well for dismantling. And unfortunately, there's a lot of unemployment in the African continent. So using people for dismantling can actually be a better solution for the time being than using equipment, in my opinion. It's important to notice that money is everything. these problems cannot be solved simply by saying you have to do it a certain way, or by implementing a certain law, or by policing people. Money still makes the world go round as much in Africa as anywhere else in the world. And we have to realize that. So if you're going to be working with the informal sector, make sure that there's a business model that allows, first of all, working with them when things are not perfect, but definitely that incentivizes improving perfection, getting step by step better. And if that's part of your long-term goal as a business, then you're definitely able to survive while improving the informal sector. And there's lots of approaches that have shown that, including ours, that this is effective. Interesting as well about the question, look at ways towards global EPR. I don't think it is in the foreseeable future that money will be shared from EPRs in Europe to Africa, but that's not the only way to make EPR global. If you make producers responsible for waste in Africa, that does not mean they need to pay fees into Europe that goes to Africa. They can simply be responsible for removing products from Africa, even if they came here secondhand. There are definitely pathways to do that, and this actually connects directly to our business model. There is a way for producers to pay a fee to us to collect waste in Africa that then contributes to their ability to satisfy EPR requirements. And there's some work already being done by the European Union on this topic. And finally, I think effective EPR can be an end goal, and it should be an end goal. But I do think short-term interventions are needed. I do think it's important to look at what can be achieved today. Don't get stuck in, we're not there yet, it doesn't work, we can't police it, there's not enough money, but look at what opportunities there are right now. I think that's the approach that EPRON takes. Documentation is a very good first step that can be done even without a lot of collection. You can already have good documentation. And then you can take the next steps of how does that documentation help business models and eventually get to EPR. And finally, I think the goal of what was said by you, Aliyu, in the very beginning, we need to look at local approaches. EPR, the way it was set up in Europe, is not going to be the same in Africa. I don't see that, or even in various different countries in Africa. I think we need to look at what is effective here. Even the most effective EPRs in Europe collect 50%. So, I mean, that's still not a perfect solution. So I really do think we need to make sure that we get creative, and that we work together to do this in an iterative process. I believe that's probably the best way forward. And yeah, very happy to get questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for your perspective. It's good to know that you're doing a lot of work in Africa, also in African soil at the moment. So great. I think one thing that is common from the conversation, because we're trying to also rush with time now, we're going to go back to questions and answers. There have been a lot of questions on the Q&A. Is that EPR, the informal sector, are an integral part of waste management in Africa within the African context, and they have to be integrated, not just formalized, but they have to be integrated. And that's basically trying to contextualize what has been the case. And thirdly, incentives play a major role in making EPR work, whether it is to get them to be part of it or because most of the times the whole issue is about, we don't want you to take away our source of income. And the last thing which I would want to highlight is that both the formal and informal sector are actually afraid of providing available data. For example, I had some conversation with also the formal collectors, and some of them were like, oh, they wouldn't provide their data if they're not getting any incentive from the government or from the EPR, itself. So there's a whole issue of incentive wired around systems of people thinking, and this is something that has to be considered in any form of design. Thank you, Reinhard. Now we're going to go to Q&A. We'll try to do that quickly just to make sure we manage time. So maybe you can try to be specific with the response, and then we can get to attend to a lot of questions. The first one is, I think you already touched on that, but maybe if you can just also give a quick point again about the whole international EPR fee. Yeah, of course, you have your argument. There are also other argument about these fees can actually be transferred and can support because the waste end up in another country. So these fees should, but again, maybe just if you can just explain how your model is quickly, how you're able to receive the producer fees to manage the waste in Africa. Do you work with the PRO in country? Just maybe a summary of how you do that quickly, please.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's work being done on trying to get the money to flow with the product, and that requires legislative changes both in Africa and in European countries. For example, in the Netherlands, fees from the Netherlands by law cannot come to Africa. So that requires legislative changes to get that to happen. And to do that on a global scale, I'm not very optimistic at how policymakers work when something has to be done quickly. It will take a long time. So the model we are working with, and there's been some talk with European parties about this, is that producers should be able to reach some of their EPR obligations in Europe by paying fees for collecting in Africa. So let's say I have a Samsung here, so let's use Samsung. I'm very sorry if Samsung's on the call, but Samsung puts a product in the Netherlands on the market. They have to reach 60% collection. But we know that many mobile phones from Europe would end up in Africa. So part of that 60%, they should be able to satisfy that by collecting in Africa. Because then in a way, the fees don't have to follow the product. It's the producer that then says, we know our products end up in this country. Even though we are not putting it there, we know it ends up there. So we can pay a fee to collect that there. So if they're able to reach their EPR obligations in Europe by paying into Africa, that would already make things much easier, and it requires a lot less legislative changes to make that work. And it's less complex if money does not have to flow from one state coffer to another state coffer. I think we all know how complex that can get.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask a quick question also from Belinda so that I can now over to Mrs. Ibukun, who has been patiently waiting, I'm sure, to address a lot of questions. Somebody asked a question about the whole, EPR fees and all of that, duplication of, okay, that I would keep that part of the question. But the second part of the question is about the benefits, there are concerns about, for example, low value plastics might not have subsidies, but for example, high value plastics, how do you do that? Do you have like some priorities for some particular waste streams, or again, some of these low waste streams that do not have value for EPR could also cause pollution? Even more, like for example, LDPs, they have low value, but they have a lot of microplastic implications. So what's your thought on that quickly before we move to the
I think
other part?
the important part is that if you're recycling something, you should take the responsibility for the full product. So you should add up the positives, subtract the negatives, and see what that balance is. In our model, we have the finances to do that. We are able to do the recycling of the valuable parts and get money back, but we're also able to pay for the negative parts, the parts that don't have any value, to recycle that properly. This is in the spirit of the way EPR already works in European countries. EPR is there to fund the non-valuable recycling because the valuable will automatically happen. Everybody wants that. So I think it's very important that EPRs, and I know there's been some EPRs that are focusing on the valuable stuff. I think in India, the EPR, you get credits for recycling things like gold and copper and silver. I think it should work. It's much more effective if you focus on EPR paying for the non-valuables, because that's the part where the problem is. That's the part that doesn't happen already through the informal recycling. That's the part that has the biggest environmental impact. I hope that answers the question. I'll look through the chat and see if I can add some in writing as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'll go back to Mrs. Ibukun, who again is leading EPR implementation for electronics in Nigeria. A few questions. One is there are concerns about lack of data transparency and traceability from the actors, that's the collectors, recyclers, and all of that. How then do you extend benefits to them? How do you quantify, and extend such benefit? Then secondly, just to add up to that, which is also part of it, there are also concerns about some PROs duplicating volumes of report and volumes of collected, recyclables to kind of meet, let's say, quotas. What would your response be to these questions?
Okay, thank you very much. For the first question, which is on documentation, what we've done is we've created a tool that helps to for data collection. We have a software that we've developed that tracks volumes from the point of the producer down to the recycler. So producers have where they can put in their market share, and then it quantifies the amount, it automatically calculates their fees for them, and they know what they're supposed to pay. And then in terms of collectors, they have their own interface where they're also supposed to do their monthly reporting. That has not been very active, but we do have that template in place. What we've been using now is the manual template where we give them an Excel sheet that has the volume and they're supposed to report with that. So, but with the software, it's something that we're going to activate very soon and make it live because we've gotten some support to do that expansion from an organization. So that is something we're going to work on very soon so that everybody have access and then the data can be tracked from all corners to know exactly what is the quantity that was managed. And this is also something that we're going to we put in our impact report on an annual basis to say this is the quantity that we worked on this year, year on, year out, like that. Then in terms of the question on multiple reporting, so typically the multiple reporting will probably come in the form of when used equipment comes to Nigeria. Let me be sure that I understand the question first, like, before I go into answering it. You're asking how is it some PROs report do multiple reporting for like a single e-waste that is managed. Is that the question?
Yeah. There was a question that was asked about like this whole duplication, perhaps intentionally sometimes to meet, the whole paper and, targets to get like funding. So such kind of um thoughts.
Well, so if the EPR system is properly developed, it shouldn't happen. Ideally, because if you have a PRO, one of the very important things for PROs, and especially for PROs like us that are members of the We Forum, we have dedicated data collection tools. So I've spoken to you about the initial tool that we have locally for collecting data from our value chain members. We then take it to the next step to report it into our own WeForum tool where different PROs use it to compare data on what's collected, to calculate CO2 emissions reduction, and also to even have information on the actual material flows. Because it's not just about collecting the computers, it's not just about collecting the phones and recycling them. What is the quantity of the critical raw materials in those products, all the component materials. So those tools help to also quantify those. And they've been designed in a way that if you are going to put in numbers doubly, then you're going to have a challenge because it's going to flag it. The tools are that sensitive to say to you, this you've put in this data, where is this next one coming in? And then the data is at our own level too, we're also tracking to make sure that the data is very clear to where things are coming from. For instance, now, in terms of how we relate with our recyclers, they're supposed to pay them according to the number of the quantity of e-waste that the collectors have brought to them to manage or that they have collected themselves to manage. Now, it's very easy for someone to tell me, oh, it's 10 tons, but we've also tied a way that these are the values of the fractions, and then this is an amount that we expect to get back from you. So if you've gone to inflate your data, then it means that at the points where you need to also pay us back some of the money for the materials, then you're going to pay more. So you will be forced to think very hard before you inflate values in terms of what you've recycled so that you can claim benefits, because at the end of the day, you probably will still lose it going downstream. So those are the checks and balances that we've put in place to prevent that for ourselves.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. There was another question also about for example, the model you mentioned on how to like have like a cooperative model, even though the informal sectors are deeply concerned about like losing their, for example, the benefit they have of not getting to pay for all of those compliances. Does, for example, the cooperative model looks at making them see value in moving to this cooperative rather than, again, that fear of taxation, just thinking about what can work so you don't get a lot of resistance at the end of the day. What's your quick thought about that?
Yeah, so basically that's the idea of the model. Rather than you saying, okay, we are going to keep regulating them, if you put them in a cooperative, they will self-regulate themselves. Just, at the EXCO level, let everybody understand this is what you're doing and this is why you're doing it and this is a value for the benefit that comes with doing it. So at that level, then you just guide them at that level and then they self-regulate themselves to say, okay, this is the direction that we need to move on to because we need to change how we are doing things. One thing is when people are put in charge to regulate themselves, you see that there's a shift and then it works closer. It's easier to, and I think you've also pointed that out in some of your comments earlier. It's easier to get them to align than when you have to, because how much people can you keep watching over as regulators? What's the capacity of enforcement capacity that exists? I mean, with that cooperative model, they regulate their people and they will even be the ones to report very recalcitrant ones to
Yeah.
the enforcement agencies when necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Then I think one more question before I come back quickly to Reinhardt, and then we wrap up because we are a bit getting out of time. So, somebody asked quickly about in terms of the whole EPR, there are obviously unintended out consequences, and it's pointing to if more emphasis is placed on EPR for recyclable materials, what about non-recyclable waste that also cause pollution? I think that was raised earlier, but again, maybe just in the Nigerian context, what would be your thought about it? Just looking at the priority of either a system or also just looking at general pollution.
So thank you very much. And that's really the value of EPR. EPR is supposed to ensure that all materials are taken care of. And it employs tools like eco-modulation to make that happen. So for products that have non-recyclable components, then the fees that is used to treat those hazardous fractions or those non-recyclable fractions is more because it has to be handled. And then having that balance of ensuring that all materials are managed is what EPR is supposed to serve. Because if you do like direct, people will just focus on what's the value for me, what do I need to do, and then they leave the others, they cherry pick. But with EPR, you make sure that all products are managed because appropriate consideration has been given to them upfront as to what needs to be done with them, what are the existing solutions, and then you can manage all products without leaving anyone out.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. No product should be left behind because if one is prioritized over the other, then there could be some consequences. That's basically prioritizing the economics over the environment. So last question, again, because of time, I'm sorry we're not able to attend to maybe some comments on the comment section, but we've attempted to address all the questions. Reinhard, the last question to you is maybe since you also kind of your model operates in terms of receiving EPR funding by producers to help them implement EPR. There's a question about where does these recovered items go to? How are they sent again based on, for example, your model? Are they sent back to the producers who pay, or is it just free into the market and go internationally to anyone who buys it? Maybe just a quick response to that.
Sure, definitely. No, first of all, we do not get EPR fees. We get fees separate from the EPR systems, but they are from producers often. So I just need to make that clear, otherwise there will be misunderstanding. But eventually, when something is recycled, the producers are not involved in that at all. We recycle it together with recyclers, and the materials that come out of that, be it negative or positive, we're responsible for that. So we pay for the disposal of the negative value products, and we sell the positive value products. So if there's metals that come out, we sell them on the market. Of course, we do work together with producers to see if we can integrate those materials back into their products, but that's a long-term strategy that takes quite a long time.
Okay, thank you for the brief response. And I think it has really been a good conversation about EPR, challenges of informal, the dynamics, the context within the Africa, and what can work, what is the way forward. But beyond just what can work, what can practically be realistic. And we've had these insights from all of these two experts, bringing in their own experiences on the ground. I would pause here, and I hope you find value in this webinar, and I'll hand over to Akanksha to wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alu, and thank you so much to the panel today. I think we've got amazing responses on all the queries, and thank you, Reinhard, for typing in most of the queries, responses. Great help there. I think the experience and the knowledge that has been shared on this particular platform and on this topic, as bringing diverse perspectives together, is beyond our expectations. So thank you for today's webinar, and it has definitely deepened our understanding and also sparked some ideas and partnerships and actions. We will ensure that we pass on some pending unanswered questions to our panel today. And as I mentioned, we've shared the LinkedIn profiles of our panelists on the chat. Please do connect with them and share whatever you want to details from them later on. As I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website. Please stay updated on future events and also subscribe to our newsletter. Don't forget to donate on our fundraiser. We've already received our first 20, supporters. So we request you all to please make a little of your effort count. Thank you all and good day to everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Aliu. Thank you, Renhard. Thank you, Madam Ibukun, for your
Bye.
time. Really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.